Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ethos Online. Again, this is a space where we can be, belong, and become the very best version of ourselves. So, wherever you're joining us today, we just want to say welcome. Thank you for joining the journey. Right here at Ethos Online, we study Torah in depth. Right, we take time to really delve in. We ask questions. Again, what was the audience, right, of this book? When was it written? Again, who wrote it? Right, what was going on in other places around the world when this piece was written? We do all of that. We do a lot of really difficult study. And so today, you're going to find we do the same thing. We actually spent hours and hours and hours on this text alone, just trying to find the right perspective, an interesting interpretation that maybe we haven't seen before. And so that's what we do. We spend a lot of time just considering what these ancient people, how they thought, what the intention was for the piece. And then, of course, we ask deeper questions of what we do with it for today. And so we are moving through the book of Genesis, the book that's often called the origin story, right? But again, we understand this was not a literal history. This was not literally their origins. This was written down, compiled, all of these stories, all of these prophetic warnings, all of the deep metaphorical pieces, right? The heroic pieces, all of this is written in 587 BC, right? Actually compiled. And so it's compiled because they are taken into Babylonian captivity, right? Their temple's destroyed. They are marched hundreds of miles on feet, and they're taken to this new place called Babylon. And there in that city, the question is, are we going to assimilate, right? Will we take on all of their stories, all of their values, all of their traditions? Will their God become our God? And so for Israel, of course, they're monotheistic, right? They believe in one God. Whereas for Babylon, they had many gods. And so will we take on the gods of Babylon, or will we choose to worship our one God? And they would argue the one true God, right? Yahweh. And so this is the reason why they come together and they say, we are going to bring this together because we will not assimilate. We want the future generations to have the story, right? We want them to keep their identity as Jews, as Israelites, Hebrew people. And so when Torah, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, when these five pieces are brought together, there's joy, there's celebration. And so what a rabbi would do is they'd sit on a stool, basically, and they'd open a piece of Torah, and they'd read that section to the people. And what they would do is then, after reading that short section, they would expand on what the meaning was, where the identity was for their people, and remind them, this is who we are, this is who we aren't, this is the direction we're going. Right? And here's how we get there. And our stories will remind us of that. And so the rabbi is not just an interpreter of Torah, he's the storyteller, right? And so people came together to hear the stories. And the rabbi would share the story and then give the wisdom on top of that, of how to interpret it, how to find meaning of who you are as a Hebrew. And so today we have churches, right? We have communities that come together, and oftentimes there will be a central figure that will show up and they will expand and share their wisdom, right? They'll bring out ancient texts often, and they'll expand on those. And again, it's interesting to me that so many different places they'll say, oh, our interpretation is better than theirs. Truth is, most of them are missing the original intent anyways, right? So it kind of becomes a cash and go. I'm going to grab this, I'm going to grab that, I'm going to pretend this one's mine, whatever. But the ancient art is still very much alive, right? Sharing the wisdom by looking at the ancient, the compilation, right, of mythology, prophetic musings. It's what traditions do, right? It's what these tribes do when they come together. And so, reminder here, Torah is a complete narrative of Israel miniaturized through its telling. And so everywhere you go in Torah, remember this is a piece written to Hebrew people. And the Hebrews found themselves in the story. And so Adam and Eve, Israel, right? Jonah, Israel. Noah, Israel. Abraham, Israel. And so we have continued on chapter 23. We still have Abraham as our central figure. Abraham, meaning literally the founder, right? The one who steps away from tradition and finds life, right? Steps away from the norm into the chaotic, into the liminal space, right? The spaces where it shifts, changes, moves, grows. He moves his tribe there, and that's where the life is, right? And so they step away from tradition into something bigger. And so Abraham is still kind of that central person in this section of Genesis that we're on. So today we're going to move through chapter 23. And so we finished chapter 22. And again, I hope you really enjoyed that one. That one was, I'm still thinking about it, right? We put, by putting Jesus back on the cross, God demanding Jesus be on the cross, we're putting Isaac back on the altar, right? That whole idea. It's not that God needed Jesus to pay for the sins of the world. That whole idea of atonement, original sin, that has never been the point. The idea was, is God good or not? Right? Is God the same as all the other gods? God is on trial, right? And in that moment, we understand God is good, right? God is love. God is forgiveness. And it was a beautiful, beautiful perspective, right? It was the original perspective of the Jewish people. So today, though, chapter 23, we've stepped on, we've moved past 22, past that really pivotal story. And so today I'm going to read you, it's a story that's just kind of passed over, right? It's a story that most people, they'll read it and there's just not much there. It's just kind of like okay, somebody died, got some land, move on, right? Let's get to the interesting stuff. But there is, of course, something always interesting in the telling. And so I'm going to read through this chapter, and there's a couple points I think are really crucial, and the reason for the telling, because there's always something there for Israel, and I would argue for us today. So I'm going to read chapter 23, and just follow along with me. So here we go. And the life of Sarah was 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died in Arab, which is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to eulogize Sarah and to bewail her. And Abraham arose from before his dead, and he spoke to the sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and an inhabitant with you. Give me burial property with you, so that I may bury my dead from before me. And the sons of Heth answered Abraham, saying, Listen to us, my lord. You are a prince of God in our midst. It is the choicest of our graves. Bury your dead. None of us will withhold his grave from you to bury your dead. Right? So they're offering Abraham, yes, take it. Right? Take the best of the best. You are a prince in our land. You are a highly regarded figure. And Abraham arose and prostrated himself to the people of the land, to the sons of Heth. And he spoke to them, saying, If it is your will that I bury my dead from before me, listen to me and entreat for me to Ephron the son of Zilor, that he may give me the Mechphileth, the double, basically cave. So this is a cave that there would be room for two, which belongs to him, which is at the end of his field. For a full price, let him give it to me in your midst for burial property. Now Ephron was sitting in the midst of the sons of Heth. And Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the sons of Heth, of all those who had come into the gate of the city. So again, this is a great connection, right? All these people have come together. Abraham is asking for this burial ground for his beloved wife who has passed, right? No, my Lord, listen to me. I have given you the field and the cave that is in it. I have given it to you. Before the eyes of the sons of my people, I have given it to you. Bury your dead, Abraham. Bury your dead, right? Continues. And Abraham, once again, prostrated himself before the people of the land. And he spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, But if only you would listen to me, I am giving the money for the field. Take it from me. I will bury my dead there. So you kind of have this back and forth, right? This is a very Jewish idea, by the way. The bargaining, the moving back and forth. The I do this, you do that. It's almost as if they're from the Midwest, right? You can never quite take a gift. You have to, no. And so Abraham, he's kind of got this Midwest mentality, right? It continues. And Ephraim replied to Abraham, saying to him, "My Lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 104 shekels of silver. What is it between me and you? Bury your dead." Again, you see this in threes, right? Bury your dead, Abraham. Bury your dead. Bury your dead. And Abraham listened to Ephraim, and Abraham weighed out to Ephraim the silver that he had named in the hearing of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, accepted by the merchant. And so the field of Ephraim, which was from Megalath facing Marn, was established as Abraham's possession. This included the field and the cave that was in it, and all the trees that were in the field, which were within the entire border around. It was to Abraham as a possession before the eyes of the sons of Heth, in the presence of all who had come within the gate of his city. And afterwards Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, which is Hebron, in the name of Canaan. And the field and the cave with it were established to Abraham as burial property, purchased from the sons of Heth. So, right, that was a lot. Lots of verbiage there. So basically, let's just recap, right? Abraham's wife dies, Sarah. Abraham goes to the inhabitants there, Ephraim, and says, "Look, I want this field, right? I would like this land, this place of Hebron." And he goes back and forth with them. They offer it as a gift. He offers money. They say, "No, we don't want your money." He says, "No, you must take the money." They take the money. The field's his. He's able to bury his dead. End of the story. But we know there's always more. Right? There's something in here worth telling, or it wouldn't have been told, right? There's something about Israel here that was worthy of it being here. And I would argue there's something here for us to learn as well. So, as always, delve in. Look at this first part. 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. You know this, right? You're also smart. You know these. There's always something about these numbers, isn't there? Numbers are not numbers. Numbers are not to be taken literally when you look in Genesis. When you take it literally, you get kind of weird, right? These numbers always have symbolic value. There's a reason why 120 is always brought up, right? 120, first off, always associated with like you've reached the pinnacle, right? You've reached the pinnacle of age. You've gained the right amount of wisdom, the right amount of I've gone through all these cycles and now I can be at peace. But notice this, there's a 7 added as well. And so I find it interesting, 120 and 7. So notice this when you look at this slide, 120 and 7. Jewish rabbis and their leaders, they would have, when they read this, they would have divided these into threes. Most of us miss this. I have missed this majority of the time. I didn't notice it until I started reading. What do the Jewish rabbis, the people who have actually written this and expanded on this for thousands and thousands of years, was there something there? And so the more I delved in, the deeper it got. And so let me share with you some interesting perspective because we, right, in the 21st century, we miss it, right? It's just numbers to us. But for them, they would have seen this division, this 3. They would have seen 100, 20, and 7. And those numbers meant something to them. And so let me share with you what those numbers meant. So 100. 100, interestingly enough, this is a number that's associated with many things, but it's mainly in relation to Abraham and Sarah here. And so the idea here, at 100, what happens? Well, Sarah gives birth. Right? This idea associated with the story, this idea is there's happiness, there's birth, there is joy there, right? These moments, these miraculous moments where, again, birth, right? It's messy, it's chaotic. Anyone that's gone through a birth knows this, right? There are moments where you're like, are we going to make this, right? It's painful, it's bloody, it's crazy, right? But at the end, there is a new birth experience. This is what happens, right? We go through this. We go through the pain, the brokenness, until there's the new birth, until there's the push, right? And now there it is. And so notice this, what one rabbi says, the number 100 gives us, Jews, hope for joy to come. We hope for new life, hope for miraculous births. So understand this. When a Jewish person's reading this and they think of the number 100, they think of new births, they think of Sarah, they think of their Exodus story. They think of their moment right now where they are in Babylonian captivity. And so they're about to experience a birth, but it's right now chaotic, it's messy, it's bloody. There's questions of, will we make this? Are we going to get through? Is new life really going to happen? Is baby going to come? Right? And they're asking that in the middle of all of this. And so this number 100 is this reminder, there's new life just around the corner. We're about to experience new birth. We're about to experience this. And so it's deeply filled with hope. It's something that you can hold on to, feeling like even though it's the middle, we're going to look back and say, you made it, right? You made it. And so you made it out of Egypt, right? We were pushed out. The new birth, you pushed out, right? Israel moved out. They were pushed out, right? A really interesting concept when you think of 100 and the associations with Sarah and the new birth. It's beautiful. And so most Jewish rabbis will consider this point when they think of 100 in relation to this moment in the story. There's the number 20, right? What does the number 20 mean? Most of them have brought this up, and I found this really interesting. Here's the best quote I found from the interpretations on the number 20. And so 20 is an interesting one because it's kind of like, it's the beginning of life, right? Most of us, we made some of our best mistakes in our 20s. And when you look back to Jewish understanding, the rabbis' rabbinical interpretations of 20, it often fits perfectly with that, right? You go to college, you make enough mistakes that by the time you're 30, you have some wisdom, right? And by the time you're 40, you're like, man, I would never want to go back to those things, right? I moved through them. So after the children of Israel wandered into the desert for 40 years, he declared that those under the age of 20 would not be punished because they did not know the difference between good and bad. The number 20 is a reminder of the learning that takes place from the wandering. That's Rashi. Think about that quote. Israel is pushed out of Egypt. New birth happens. And now you've got the keys to the car. What will you do? You got the freedom, right? You've been given the keys. What are you going to do now that you can drive? Now that you've got all that freedom, now that you're out there and you're wandering. Well, for Israel, we know the story, right? It's mistake after mistake after mistake. And yet there is learning in the midst of all of it. Right? And so those 20s, it's such an interesting fit. It's the time of wandering for them. It's the time of movement, change, mistake after mistake. And yet Israel grows and they mature. And it's only because they mature that they can fully be present in the next stage. Beautiful, right? This is so good. Right? We missed this. It was there the whole time. And so you wander in your 20s, right? You move through 20 until you get to 7. And most rabbis will bring this up. We know 7, right? We've heard of 7 over and over again. 7 is associated with like the perfect number, perfection. It's the God number, right? You look at Revelation, 7's in there often. 7. But here's the thing, what do Jewish interpreters find connected to this number with this specific story? I'll give you another quote, and I found this one really fascinating in relation to 7 and Abraham and Sarah. So listen to this one, watch this on this slide. It's really beautiful. The final number in Sarah's life is 7. And we have shown that this number should be associated with communications from God. Since King Solomon spoke as God's chosen king from the 7th step of his throne, and Joseph, who was the first son of the second wife, represented Jacob's 7th son, and he interpreted God's message. All of this to say in this interpretation, 7 was this moment where God is observed. The divine is seen clearly. Think about that, how beautiful that is, right? 100, when you think of the hundreds, the miraculous, the moments, the new birth, the crazy, chaotic moments. Finally, you're free. Into the 20s where you wander, you move, you learn, you change, you shift until finally, through it all, you look back. For the Jews, it was always look back, right? When Moses is up on top of Mount Sinai, the Jewish understanding was he could not look at God. He didn't see God. He only could see where God had been. He looked back, right? The idea for the Jewish people, when Moses looks back, his life is coming to a close, was the idea. He is closing in on, he's seen it all, right? And so 7, this is God speaks. He shows up. You're able to see the whole thing. And when you see the whole thing, you rest. You sit in peace. You enjoy the wisdom that comes, right? 7. And so for Israel and for Sarah here, Sarah's gone through this cycle. And so when you think of Israel, hope, right? Chaotic birth, all of that into wandering, and then promised land. You step into the promised land. It's where you see the fulfillment of the promise, the fulfillment that God has showed up. In fact, when you look back, it was there the whole time. So good. So good. But I want you to think about your own journey. Think about your own journey for a moment. You in the story now. We talked about Israel in the story, but think about you in the story. Hope, the chaotic shifts, the change, the movement, the growth, right? The new birth, those moments. And then think about the moment. Think about the moment where you began to wander. You took all that freedom and you moved and changed and shifted with it. You made enough mistakes until you were able to step into those moments where you saw the beauty of all the things that were before you, right? You look back and you realize, those were crazy mistakes, but boy, did I learn from them, right? So good. And again, that's where I see myself in the story. I think you and I, much like the Israelites who read this story, they saw themselves there. They contemplated their life, the fullness of their life. Not only just their people, but the fullness of their lives, the changes, the shifts, the journey, the cyclical movements of what it means to be a human, to go through the change, to step into the chaos, the shifts, the movement, and then finally into the wisdom of the 7s. It's so good. It reminds me, again, I teach English at a high school as well. And so what's really fun for me is teaching kids the story arc, right? The arc of a story. Because a good story is going to have rising actions, right? It's going to be filled with lots and lots of different conflicts. And at some moment during all of these little conflicts, you're going to get a crisis, right? You're going to get the 100, the crisis. And the question is, what do we do when the crisis hits? And then, bam, we wander, we make the mistake, we fall. There's always a moment where the hero stands up to the dragon and he loses. And then, only then, after he loses, he gets sight of something new. There's that moment where they have new hope, right? Someone says something, they see a vision, they get new hope, and they rise again. And they show up and they face the dragon again. And after they face the dragon, that climactic moment, they win and the resolution happens and they can later look back. Beautiful. Because really that's our story, right? It's a cycle we've all been through. And I think about Israel here. Hope into these moments where we fail, we experience loss, and then we see the divine when we look back. The story is there. It's one that's been repeated. And really, whether you're looking at Star Wars, Walter Mitty, some of the greats, Little Miss Sunshine, whatever movie it is you're watching, if it's a good one, it's going to follow this arc because it's the arc of life. It's the arc that we all experience over and over again. And Israel, when they're reading this, they're thinking now in their 7s, right? They're 120. And they're looking back and saying, oh, that's life. That's life. That's us right now, right there. It's so beautiful. That's what Israel sees when they see themselves in this story. Let me give you a little bit more though, because we're not done, right? Even though that was so good, we're not done quite yet. Let's dig a little bit deeper. Notice this, Karath Arab, which is Hebron. What about this place, right? And what is this place? This is the place, if you read deep into the story of Abraham, you're going to find Abraham comes to this place over and over again. It's actually the place that he considers home. It's where he, the Bible says, pitches his tent. It's where he goes over and over again. So think about how beautiful this is. Abraham brings his bride home. Abraham, the messianic figure, brings his bride home. Abraham, the picture of the divine brings his people home. So good, right? The divine finally brings his people home where they rest, where they can be at one, shalom, nothing missing, nothing broken, kingdom of God reality. Finally, they can sit and rest in this place. So good. Yeah. Here's one interpretation. We know not what happens when our bodies take our last divine breath, but we believe in our hearts a life well lived finds peace. A life well lived finds home. Yeah, right? I know. When you've moved through the cycles of life, you can rest easy when you're facing death. Right? We don't have to fear it because there are no regrets, right? Isn't that so beautiful to think about? Israel, in some of the generations that have been there in captivity, you're going to die in captivity, but here's the beauty. The cycle will continue. And you can rest now, knowing that at some point in time, the divine will bring its people to rest, to shalom, to nothing missing, nothing broken. Look back at those cycles of life. Learn to find peace in them. I read a book with my students yearly. It's one of my favorite books. And the book, if you've never read it, please go out buy this book. It's so beautiful, so inspiring. It's about a professor who finds out he has ALS. He's going to die within maybe 3 to 6 months. And so he decides he's going to share his wisdom with his former student, right? Which is really what Torah is, right? It's our people, our wise voices are going to die in captivity. And they are going to share the wisdom with you so that after they die, when you are freed, you can take that wisdom on with you, right? Yes. And so in this book, he says something really beautiful about the idea of the different stages of life that I wanted to share with you. This is what he says in the quote. The truth is, part of me is every age. I'm a 3-year-old. I'm a 5-year-old. I'm a 37-year-old. I'm a 50-year-old. I've been through all of them, and I know what it's like. I delight in being a child when it's appropriate to be a child. I delight in being a wise old man when it's appropriate to be a wise old man. Think of all I can be. I am every age up to my own. I love this. When we face death, when we live this full life, when we've moved through the ups and the downs and the middle space where we spend most of our time, right? When we do this, we have nothing to regret. We can look back on life and say, it was a life well lived. Yeah, all of that from Hebron. He takes her home. She's lived a full life. She can now rest. You can now rest, Israel. And so what we have here, moving through the rest of the chapter, Abraham again bargains. He's told again, I'll give you this money. They say no. We read that part of the story. And truthfully, not a lot is said other than here's the kicker. He wants to buy it, right? He doesn't think he deserves it. And so I thought about that for a bit. Why is it that Israel feels like they don't deserve the gift? And then I think about like mainstream Christianity. I think about all of those songs that are sung. I am unworthy. I'm an evil sinner. I'm bad. I'm nothing, right? I think about Abraham here, who doesn't quite believe he deserves to be home. Yeah. He doesn't think he deserves to have shalom. So he's got to buy it. He's got to pay for it at a price. But the message is, nothing you do earns you this. It's given freely. A better way of saying it, it's already yours. That peace you're looking for, it's already yours. You don't have to bargain with the divine, is what this message was. Israel, you think you need to bargain, you think you need to do certain things in order to find this peace? You think you need to be perfect? You think you need to do all these perfect things? No, that peace, that connection that you're looking for, that freedom, it's already yours. And isn't that really the message of Jesus? He says, even though you're in the middle of captivity and you're looking for shalom, the kingdom come reality, the truth is it's already right here within you. And it's the same message that Israel had in this moment. Stop bargaining with the divine. Stop bargaining for this place, this perfect place. Stop bargaining for peace. It's already yours. It's the story of the prodigal son, right? Everything I have is yours. It's always been yours. You ran away for a bit. You went through exile. You wandered, but you came back home. And you tried to bargain again, didn't you? But the truth is, it was always yours, Abraham. It was always yours, Israel. It was always yours, whoever it is that's watching today. That peace, that fullness, that connection, it's always been yours. You don't have to work for it, right? You don't have to bargain for it like Abraham is attempting to do. It's always been yours. I love this quote. Abraham finds a resting place for Sarah, just as we Jews will find our own resting place, our own time of peace and calm. There will be room for Yahweh's people to abide in the storm. We will find rest. Yeah, we'll find home. We will find the place where we experience shalom. And we don't have to bargain for it. It's already ours, isn't it? Yes, so good. So the question, of course, how do we take it home, right? How do we apply this to today? So I went a couple different directions, but I kept going back to this. How do we appreciate our past? I know for a while for me, there were many moments where I would look back and be ashamed. Many moments where I thought, man, I wish I'd done it differently. I'm sometimes embarrassed, sometimes getting riled up, wishing I'd said or done something differently, only to think, no, it's probably good that I didn't. We look back and sometimes we get caught up in that. And so I thought, if I appreciated my past more, I might not get so caught up in wishing to repeat it, right? So number one, what if instead we look on our past with grace? Think about that. You didn't know what you do now. You didn't, right? You have gained wisdom since then. And so why beat yourself up over things you lacked before, right? You wouldn't repeat those now. And so don't beat yourself up over it. You've learned, you've grown. Maybe instead of looking back and feeling ashamed, show yourself some grace. Maybe even find a way to celebrate it. Yeah. Look back with grace. Number two, appreciate the growth, right? You have come a long way. So take time to be grateful for the change. When you see it, when you appreciate it, you can say, oh, all right, I'm not stuck in that cycle anymore. What a great blessing. Maybe I've got new ones, but either way, I can appreciate the fact that I have grown in this spot, in this place. So good. Number 3, consider the non-quality time. I really, really like this because when I think about the past, often I'm tempted to do this. I'm tempted to look at the highs and the lows, right? The really great times and the really low times. Truth is, life, the majority of it happens in the middle, right? We call it the non-quality time. But what that really means is it's the time that it wasn't so traumatic. And so the quality time is maybe that time that you spend with your daughter just watching a television show and eating egg bagel sandwiches, right? Maybe it's just those special times where you're just having dinner with a friend. Nothing crazy. It wasn't anything super expensive. It was just you and a friend having an interesting conversation. Those are the moments, right? That's what gave your life texture. Those other things, they came and they went. But that middle ground, that non-quality time, right? That stuff in the middle, that's where the life was. And so rather than just considering the super highs, super lows, think about that quality time that you got to experience. And when you do, you begin to appreciate your life and where you've been so much more because you realize it was so much bigger than the highs and the lows. You can actually really appreciate where you've been, and you can actually begin learning to live more fully in that middle space. And then lastly, take time to see it in others. Remember, other people have a story too. And so learning to appreciate where they've been, learning to appreciate their stories, learning to appreciate that they've shifted and changed and grown, learning to listen to their stories, it only brings us closer when we get to these moments of 127, right? So good. I hope you enjoyed this. This chapter was interesting. This was fun to find something deep, even in stories that are oftentimes skipped past. So if you've enjoyed this, please consider going to ethos-church.org/donate. We are tax sorry, I can't say the word. We are a tax deductible organization. And so please consider donating. We really do spend a lot of time. We'd love to continue to see this grow on all the other platforms we're on, but we'd like to see this grow over the new year. So share it, donate, help us continue to grow this. We want to move through the rest of Genesis. We've got a good amount left, don't we? Yeah, 50 chapters, 50 plus chapters in Genesis. We're about halfway and we're doing great. There's so much more to come. Help us continue moving this awesome ministry. Continue joining us online and hit that subscribe button. Hit that subscribe button. Share it with everyone you can. We want to grow our YouTube channel as well. Everyone take care, and we'll see you next week in chapter 24. Bye.